the fortune that vanished overnight. It happened faster than anyone could believe. One moment, a fortune stood unshaken. The next, it dissolved into thin air, as if the numbers had never existed at all. There's a reason this story matters now. In a world where wealth moves at the speed of a tap, fortunes rise and fall with the quiet flick of an algorithm. To understand how fragile modern prosperity can be, we need to revisit a moment when everything seemed safe, right until it wasn't. It began with a man who thought he had found the perfect formula. His strategy was elegant, disciplined, almost mechanical in its certainty. Every month, his fortune climbed higher, and every chart he studied confirmed what he already believed. He had cracked the code. For years, nothing challenged that belief. The markets rewarded him. Friends sought his advice. Analysts whispered that he had discovered a hidden rhythm others could not see. But beneath that calm surface, small imbalances were starting to grow. They didn't show up in the headlines. They didn't break into the data feeds he trusted. They hid inside the assumptions guiding his every decision, waiting for the right moment to shift. And slowly, that moment approached. The first sign came as a quiet tremor, barely noticeable. Prices moved in ways they weren't supposed to. Patterns that once behaved predictably began drifting out of line. He dismissed it as noise. After all, his models had survived worse. His confidence wasn't arrogance, just a natural comfort of a long winning streak. Still, something felt off. A restlessness crept into the markets. Volatility whispered at the edges. Liquidity began to thin, almost imperceptibly. And though he sensed a change, he couldn't yet understand its direction. The system he built had always protected him. Why should this time be different? As the day unfolded, he tightened his positions, convinced the storm would pass. He believed discipline was strength. He believed patience was safety. But the forces gathering beyond his control had outgrown the tools he trusted. This was the moment the story began to turn. He watched the screens with steady focus, waiting for the market to correct itself. It always had. When pressure built, it eased. When prices slipped, they recovered. His models were built on years of patterns that repeated like seasons. But this time, the air felt heavier, and each new tick on the chart carried a weight he couldn't quite explain. The reveal came slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor. A large player began unwinding positions. Quietly at first, then with growing urgency. It was the kind of move that didn't show up in public news, but rippled through the order books. His algorithms detected the distortion a moment too late. As spreads widened, he realized liquidity was slipping away. The exits were still open, but the crowd was already pushing toward them. He hesitated. Selling too early could lock in unnecessary losses. Selling too late could be fatal. That tension between discipline and fear sat heavy on his chest. He convinced himself the market would snap back. It always did. But beneath his confidence, uncertainty was beginning to take root. Then came another blow. A correlated asset, one his models believed moved independently, suddenly lurched downward. It shouldn't have mattered. It wasn't part of his core strategy. Yet the drop hinted at something deeper. A systemic shift, a tide pulling across multiple markets at once. That was a scenario he had always dismissed, the one risk he believed his diversification protected him from. But the walls were narrowing. His positions began to wobble, and the safety buffers he'd trusted for years started compressing. The algorithms signaled caution. Not panic, not catastrophe, just an unnerving suggestion that the foundation was less stable than it appeared. He dug deeper into the data streams, searching for clues, volume patterns, order flow, correlations. Every metric pointed to rising tension. Even the calmest indicators twitched with unease. Something was spreading, fear, doubt, or maybe just a recognition that the market's balance had quietly tipped. This was the early conflict, a storm still forming, silent but advancing. A storm that didn't care about his models, his track record, or his belief that he had mastered risk. And as the pressure built, he faced a truth he had hoped to avoid. The moment where certainty meets its first real crack. The rupture began with a single, violent move. A price swing so sharp it sliced through his safeguards before he could react. His system triggered an alert, then another. Then a cascade of warnings that flashed across the screen like a series of silent alarms. The market wasn't correcting. It was unraveling. He tried to stay calm, reminding himself that volatility often overshoots before settling. But the numbers kept slipping, and the protective layers he had built over years were peeling away in minutes. His models recalculated in real time, each iteration shrinking his margin for safety. What once felt like an impregnable fortress now felt like a house with windows rattling in the wind. The conflict surged when liquidity vanished altogether. Bids that had supported his positions only hours earlier disappeared, as if wiped clean. Sellers dominated the screen. Buyers stepped aside. The market turned into a vacuum where every move downward accelerated the next. He attempted to offload part of his exposure, but the orders slid into a void, filling at worse and worse prices. Or not at all. Then came the psychological break. The moment when the problem was no longer external. It was inside him. Doubt tightened around his thoughts. Every decision felt like choosing between two losing outcomes. He questioned every assumption, every rule he had sworn to follow. The discipline that once felt like strength now felt like chains locking him to a failing strategy. His phone buzzed nonstop, messages from partners, brokers, friends who sensed a shift. He ignored them. His entire focus narrowed to the unfolding chaos on the screen. A lifetime of calm analysis gave way to raw survival. If he closed everything now, he could salvage a fragment of his fortune. If he held on a little longer, maybe the market would rebound just enough to ease the destruction. Minutes stretched into hours, each one carving another piece out of what remained. Charts dipped, paused, then plunged again. Correlated assets fell in brutal unison. Rumors hit the wires. A fund collapse, a margin call, a forced liquidation. Every headline felt like a direct hit, feeding the panic rippling across the markets. He wasn't alone. Traders across the world felt the same grip of uncertainty. Machines were selling. Humans were panicking. And somewhere in the center of that maelstrom, he realized the truth. The formula that had given him everything was now dismantling everything he had built. The perfect system had become the perfect trap. This was the full conflict. Unavoidable, accelerating, merciless. The moment before the final break, where one decision could define the end of the story or the beginning of an entirely different one. He made his choice in a moment that felt both endless and razor-thin. The final plunge struck with a force that left no room for hesitation. Charts bled red. Alerts howled. The screens blurred as the positions collapsed one after another. This was the climax, clean, brutal, undeniable. The market had delivered its verdict, and there was no strategy left to soften the blow. When the dust settled, the silence felt unreal. Hours of chaos had emptied into a stillness that pressed against his thoughts. He stared at the remaining balance, a fraction of what had once seemed untouchable. The fortune he built over years had vanished in a single, merciless wave. But within that loss, something shifted. The fear receded. The noise faded. What remained was a clear, almost startling understanding of what had gone wrong. The system hadn't betrayed him. It had simply shown him its limits. He had confused consistency with invincibility, mistaking patterns for laws and probabilities for guarantees. Every decision he made had been rational, until the moment the world stopped behaving the way it always had. And in that shift, he discovered the flaw he'd never accounted for. The market doesn't reward certainty. It punishes it. In the quiet aftermath, he replayed the turning points, the early tremors, the ignored warnings, the mounting pressure he believed he could outthink. The lesson was harsh but unmistakable. Markets aren't puzzles to be solved. They're living systems, fluid, unpredictable, shaped by fear, greed, and sudden change. And anyone who forgets that finds themselves caught in the same trap he once believed he was immune to. His loss wasn't just a collapse of numbers. It was a mirror held up to every investor who has ever felt invincible. Every person who trusted a model more than their own awareness. Every trader who thought history guaranteed their future. The truth was simple. Resilience comes not from perfect strategies, but from understanding how quickly the world can shift beneath your feet. And as he stepped back from the screen, drained yet strangely clear-minded, he knew this wasn't the end. It was the beginning of a different kind of wisdom. one that doesn't promise certainty, but respects the forces that shape every rise and fall. Subscribe to join the journey.